Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Grab a notepad, grab a pen, because I want you to take notes. I want you to make a commitment to yourself that you'll jot down some sort of action item that you can implement in your business today, because that's what this is all about, implementation to drive your business forward. Now, I've recorded a video in the past about evaluating a process, and I described in that video where I observed a process and I provided feedback. Now, I was recently asked to do that again, and I'm going to cover some of the same stuff. There will be some overlap. If you haven't seen that previous video, go back and review that, because I'm not going to get into depth about some of the points I made in that video, but there was a little gem that I discovered in this one. So first of all, let me just describe what happened. I received a communication from somebody who had documented his process. He recorded about a 15-minute screen capture video and shared that with me and asked me to provide some feedback about how he might improve his process. Now, that's because this particular process was done online. It's virtual. It was on the computer. Of course, many of you operate your business and you have processes that take place outside of the virtual world, outside of the computer. You're doing this on various forms of equipment, on a shop floor, or whatever the case may be. You have different logistical processes. Hopefully, the ideas that I share with you, you can apply them in whatever context is most relevant for your business. But in this particular one, it was video screen capture software that was used to communicate it. You could do this in any other way. You could actually go around with your phone and record a process. But the key here was the process was documented visually so that I, a third party, a third person who is not involved in this process day to day, could observe it, could scrutinize it, could criticize it, provide some feedback, some constructive feedback. So I did that. And as I say, the process took about 15 minutes, and so the video was 15 minutes long. And in 15 minutes, I counted 10 areas I made 10 suggestions for improvements. I had questions. Now, in this case, there was not an audible recording or narration of what was going on in the process. And at first, I found that very difficult. I was trying to ascertain what the person may be doing. I mean, a picture's worth 1,000 words, a video's worth 1,000,000 words, but it's very helpful to have some audio. I didn't have any audio. The person, unlike the previous time in that other video that I described it, did not narrate what he was doing. So I had to try to gather, make some assumptions. And so I asked some questions. Instead of making statements, I asked some questions in my feedback. And I later decided that was kind of useful. It was it may not have been better or worse, but in some ways it was better, and maybe in other ways it wasn't as good, not being able to communicate or hear that part of the communication where the person was narrating what they were doing. So it caused my brain to go to a different area. I started thinking about things a little bit differently. I was able to focus. I wasn't distracted, I guess you could say, by the narration. I was able to focus exactly what was happening. And what I ended up doing in this case was I was focused on a lot of what I thought was waste based on movement I was seeing on the screen that seemed unnecessary for me. So the first tip I want to remind you is to look at the 7th and 8th form of Muda. Visit our video on that if you haven't seen that. You need to familiarize yourself with the various forms of waste, and the Japanese call waste Muda. And that is very helpful. Now, because I've got a lot of experience with that, my brain goes to that automatically. And then I'm also a very critical person in nature, so I start to look at things that seem inefficient to me, and I jot those down. So I was just pausing this person's video and making notes. So that's another point that I want to make to you in terms of recommendation when you're doing this. And that's your homework assignment today. You're going to do this. Remember, we're talking about 15 minutes that it takes to record the video, and you can have someone else do it and share it with you, or you can do it yourself. And then 15 minutes, to watch the video, I guess, as you're pausing, and that's the tip I was giving you, is pause and take notes to document your feedback and your questions. So you're really less than an hour gonna invest in this in order to come up with improvement, and that's definitely worth it. So familiarize yourself with the different types of Muda and lend a critical eye to what you're observing. And one of the things that I observed was I wasn't sure why there was so much scrolling going on. And so I started to take a note on how much scrolling and how many clicks and how much transferring between tabs. All of that is motion and it can be unnecessary. I wondered, is this necessary? But the real gem that I came up with in this particular one was that this particular individual did not seem to be taking advantage of, and may very well have been unaware of, a feature in the software that he was using. And in fact, when I went back later and reviewed it, I thought, oh, there's probably at least 3 instances where this person is doing something that isn't the most efficient way that you could do it with the software. So although that is a, I'm gonna define that almost as a new form of waste. Do you have equipment or computer? The real gem that I'm talking about today is software power and features that are not being used to save time in your organization because of ignorance, because of a lack of knowledge, a lack of training. And it's on you, it's not your people's fault. So take a look at that. I have observed this time and again throughout the years because software is so robust now. Think about when you observe, say, an elderly person, maybe your parents or grandparents, you see somebody who's from, the boomer, the stereotypical boomer, using software, and it's almost painful to watch because they're going fairly slow and they're not using things the proper way or the way that you could, and they're not using it as efficiently. Well, there's that component. It's that kind of idea. But even the youngest people, even the people who are most technologically savvy, very often don't realize that there are several features built into a particular piece of software they may be using. None of us know it completely, comprehensively in such a way that we would never be guilty of skipping over a particular feature and trying to accomplish something within the software using a far less effective method or less efficient. So give some consideration to that. What about your equipment? You've invested in software and different types of equipment. It might be hardware in your business. Does everybody know how to use that really, really well? And what I recommended in this case is spend a little bit of time each week sharpening the saw. Remember, that's one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. Spend time learning and improving your skills. So if a person is always engaged in a logistical process, maybe they're using equipment, maybe they're using software, particular tools or whatever, and they are productive, that's great, but you need to take them aside insofar as you believe that that is a habit of highly effective people. Dedicate part of their time to improvement, to training. You might do the training or it might be self-guided. And in this particular instance, I collected some resources, shared it with the person. In fact, I decided myself, because of a particular question I asked, I thought there had to be a better way. So I just did a little quick research into some resources on that software, and I watched less than a 3-minute video. It was closer to a 2-minute video, and I learned there's a way better way to do a particular task that we were doing. And that will save, I'm not sure how much. I didn't measure that, which is another tip. You're going to measure this. I did recommend that the person measure this and take a look at how much more efficient, how much time savings there are in those particular suggestions that I made. But just taking 2 minutes to review a resource on the software revealed a function to me, a feature in the software that we weren't using, that, or this individual wasn't using, that once used will save, well, not incalculable, but a lot of time. It's going to be, when you compare that, it'll pale in comparison to the amount of time we spent in terms of discovering that. So that's another tip here, is that the concept of doing what I did, what I've described here, is having somebody reach out and ask for criticism. Make sure that that's part of your culture. Now, I was really impressed that this person took the time to do that. Now, I later found out that his supervisor made the recommendation and said that he should involve me as well. But even still, not knowing that when I went into the task, I was very careful not to be critical in any kind of cruel way or anything that could be considered personal. I was really happy. I thought, oh wow, that's a great culture that a person reaches out, so let me try to be useful. That's another tip you want here, is you want to revisit this from time to time. You have to go back in your organization and look at all of the various processes, whether it's in your office, in your administration and accounting processes, or whether it's logistical, it's in watching how you actually perform a service, whether it's how you manufacture a product, whatever it is, take a look at it. Even if it's you that does it, what you want to do, if you're the person who is engaging in the process, then record it and in some way document it and share it with someone else. That's the key. It has to be someone else looking at this. And it was not obvious to this person who was doing it because he's getting pretty efficient at this process. And frankly, if I had to do the process he was doing in 15 minutes, it would have taken me maybe a half an hour or an hour to do the process. He's gotten pretty efficient at it, but still, he's the expert, right? But still, a third-party observer, can look and, not being familiar with the process, can ask questions, and then just with a little bit of time invested in a learning resource, find a better way. So I mixed up some tips in there. Make sure you're sharpening the saw. Figure out, do you have a manual or some kind of help resource for the equipment, the tools that you use for your processes? What about the software? Is there training tools and trips, a help menu, various knowledge-based documents that came with your software? Do you have some support behind your software, individuals who can give you a little bit of training? Are there videos? Whatever it is, spend some time on a regular basis and make sure that everyone in your organization understands that it's expected that we spend time each week sharpening the saw. So the gem that I came away from with this process, even though there were 10 tips for improvement, the biggest one that I've observed throughout the years, and I guarantee it's happening in your organization, is not taking advantage of all the features that are inherent in the software you're using. Now, I'm saying software, and that's a big one because software has so much in terms of hidden features, we'll call them, but also in your equipment or tools. Think of it, look beyond your software, look to your hardware, whatever equipment you're using, but certainly examine your software and consider what ways, because what happens here is the designer of the software is getting feedback from a multitude of users, and they continue to improve this. And that's the great thing about cloud-based software compared to the old days where you had these server-based softwares that were really difficult to update. These things are improving constantly. Like almost daily, you're getting updates to your cloud-based software. And so to the extent that you're using really good cloud-based software, you will probably never be able to be on top of it. You will always have to spend some time figuring out those features, and people are not just intuitively doing this. You need to schedule this in, you need to create this culture. The other thing about software is the integration that's possible. So another thing I looked at, I remember I talked about looking at scrolling and looking at the clicks, the number of clicks that were happening, keystrokes, all of these things I look at, you might think, oh, it's so minor, but it's true. Like instead of looking in a drop-down menu and scrolling to find something, just tapping the keyboard for the first digit of what you might be looking for. Most software just automatically responds that way. And to the extent that you can have everyone in your organization most optimally using your software and using keyboard shortcuts and all sorts of tips for using things much more efficiently, you're going to shave off time off your processes, and that all adds up. Time is money. The other one that I was alluding to a moment ago is integrations. Does your software integrate with other pieces of software? Are you using piecemeal software that you've collected throughout the years? That's an observation I make of most organizations, and I would really strongly encourage you to consider getting software that fully integrates. Now, these days, more and more software manufacturers, developers are making it so that an API can make it very easy for their software to integrate with others that you might be using. But you might have some software that you've been using from a big company throughout the years that is more protective. They don't have anything that's, open software, and they're not really easy to integrate with, and that's causing you all sorts of problems. It may be time to consider switching that. We offer a software package where there's almost nothing you can think of in your business that our software doesn't cover. We cover everything, and it's fully customizable, fully integrated. So what you end up then having is you avoid having duplicate entries. You do something in one piece of your software in one end of the business, and in another area of the business, the other software that they use is completely updated. Your customers may do one thing in software that is customer facing, and then your sales team, your accounting department, your logistics, your delivery, all of these types of things are updated automatically. So integrations are a big one. The other one that I noticed in this process was automations. Are there things that you can automate? And we've gone out of our way to try to automate those things. Remember, most often the most expensive part of your operation are your people. And so what we're always trying to do is save your people time so that your people can be more productive and more efficient. That makes them that much more effective. So look at ways for driving down the amount of volume of work that is necessary, if it can be done through automations, through integrations, more effectively without very much waste. Now, I sort of suggested that I may have discovered a new form of waste. I don't mean to, that would be disingenuous. This form of waste that I was describing earlier about not using all of the features of the software or your equipment, of your tools, having it remain more or less dormant. You're not using a feature, I guess it's dormant. And that would be, I think, could be categorized as waiting, where you, in the process I've described, if it took 15 minutes and we could get it down to 13 minutes, there's an extra 2 minutes of waiting that the next person in line, or your customer, or whatever it happens to be in your production channel, if you shaved off 2 minutes, there's 2 minutes of less waiting that the person who's waiting, the customer or the stakeholder who's waiting at the end, doesn't have to experience anymore. So that's not a new form of waste. That's one of the 7 forms of Muda. Also, I described motion, and sometimes there's conveyance involved, and I'm not going to go through all those forms of waste again, but I think that the main thing that I discovered was that there was a lot of waiting that can be avoided by making sure that we take advantage of all the features that we have inherent in our software, in our equipment, in our tools. I hope some of you didn't tune out when we started talking about integrations and automations, customized software and all this kind of stuff, because you may not be familiar with how this works. Companies like ours, we do this very inexpensively. The clients reach out to us and say, you know what? The software is not rocket science nowadays, and there is some do-it-yourself nature to it and everything, but we focus on what we focus on, and we want to keep our people engaged in doing what they do best. Would you please just come out, look at our process, and integrate some stuff for us, create some automations for us? We offer that very inexpensively. We have experts, and that's all they do. Why are you just dismissing this? If you are afraid of technology, you may be stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. You're thinking that you're saving some money on software, and when in fact your experience with software is based on some antiquated notion from years gone by, and now you could be, taking on, as I said, like 50 pieces of software, and you won't necessarily use them all, but it's all probably for cheaper than you used to use for one piece of software. And then for us to integrate that stuff and customize it for you and everything, you can really cut down on that waiting. And that's where the money is. making sure that you eliminate waste in your organization. So I don't want to go on about this. All these concepts are integrated. I wanted you to come away with the main underlying point today is, do you have features inherent in your software that your team doesn't know about? And by committing to a little bit of weekly saw sharpening, spending some time to stay abreast of all the features of the tools, to learn more, to do that self-improvement on your hardware, your tools, your equipment, will your team become that much more efficient, that much more effective, and therefore your operation and overall your business becomes more effective. And once again, to the extent that you do this and your competitors do not, you will thrive, you will beat them, and that's what this is all about. So I think that's where I want to leave it today. And I could have gone into some greater detail of what we did. That's not important, because I don't want to exclude anyone and have people thinking, oh, well, our processes aren't so software based or whatever, so that doesn't apply to me. I want you to apply these concepts in your business and be honest with yourself. What did you take down? Remember, today's homework is go out and do one process, regardless of how small it is, document it and see, can you come up with one way to make it better? Can you think of any way in which you are experiencing waste? You should be able to do. Maybe you want to share that video with us and have us come back. I'll bet you we can come up with 10 suggestions of how to make that a little bit better. And don't dismiss little changes. There are opportunities to make big things when you consider the cumulative effect of time on making these changes and these improvements. Anyway, that's where I want to leave it today. Hope you got something out of this. Don't forget, we put a link in the description of our videos, not only to the services we offer that may be relevant to your business, we also put a link to a form that you can fill out for free if you want to ask for some advice on how to do something related to your business. And I'll record a video on that, giving you advice. It'll be very relevant to what your business is, and we will keep it, if you wish for us to do so, we will keep it confidential. You can do so anonymously. We won't mention your name or your business. Some people in the past have said they don't want to leave the comments because they don't really want to reveal who they are and what their business struggles are or whatever. They like it more general. That's what we do. We're happy to do that. Fill out one of those forms. Visit our website if you want to see if our software package is right for you, if maybe you want us to do some integrations for you and streamline some of your processes. And by all means, leave comments that the community can read and learn from, because we need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.